I think he's a good coach. I got to see him up close and personal running some practice down in Tallahassee. He had the misfortune of coaching in the Willie Taggart era at Florida State. So to some degree, success was capped because the program as a whole and the practices were run very poorly. But I thought in terms of what he did in practice, it was run well. And he's a good coach. I got a chance to get some sense of what he does in terms of how he teaches, and actually I'll post some stuff up on the via the Inside Carolina Premium board. I'll post up some stuff in terms of there's some stuff out there where he explains some of what he does, but he's got his own distinctive ways of teaching certain things, and I think the way he drills his players is pretty consistent and pretty good. The players down there really liked him. The offensive line actually liked working with him. They said he was demanding and he wanted them to be physical, but they felt like he was a good coach and got the best out of him. But like I said, those offenses were bad, partly because of who he was coaching under, and they brought him and. Actually, the way that this worked, so to walk it back a little bit in terms of giving you a little history, when Willie Taggart took over in 2018, basically Florida State went from under Jimbo Fisher in the last year under Jimbo Fisher. They only won 7 games that year, but they were, I think, 12th in F plus and S&P plus. They were in the same range. So they were a good football team. Overall, they just had some really bad luck and weren't able to pull out some games that they were in. The next year, they fell into like the 80s, and then they were in like the almost 100 range the year following. So those two years were just a precipitous fall. But offensively, they fell into the hundreds from 2017 to 2018. And they brought Randy Clements in 2019 with Kendall Briles. And what they did is they hired Kendall Briles as the offensive coordinator because it was obvious that Willie Taggart running his own offense was not going to work, especially with the group that they had on campus. So they brought in a hired gun. They brought in Kendall Briles, and Briles would not take that job unless he came as a package deal with Randy. That was the only way he would take that job. Because they had an offensive line coach in place, Greg Fry, who's actually a good coach himself. He was at Duke after that, and he's a good offensive line coach. But they ended up terminating Greg Fry, and it was kind of a bad deal. They did him wrong, I think. Honestly, they did not do right by Greg Fry in how they handled that. But they did that because Kendall Briles basically said, "I'm not coming unless I bring Randy." That's how important Randy was to what Kendall thought he could do as an offensive coordinator, because Randy basically worked as the run game coordinator for Kendall at that point, and he handled things up front and made sure that things ran that they ran the ball well. And then when they got fired after that year, along with the whole Willie Taggart staff, basically, when Kendall went to Arkansas. That changed some things because, of course, at Arkansas, you've got Pittman, who has his own ideas of how to run the football and what he wants to do in the running game. So that pairing kind of ended at that point. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of how bad things were, Florida State averaged 2.79 yards per rush in 2018 with Willie Taggart as the play caller and all of that. When they brought Randy Clements in along with Kendall Briles the next year, they averaged over a yard more per rush the next year. They went to 3.83 yards per rush with the same personnel,
which is a significant.
I mean, that's a jump of over a quarter. I mean, that's almost a 30% jump in production in terms of running game production that Randy Clements and Kendall Briles brought that year. So I think that tells you a good bit about what he can do and what he brings to the table in terms of being able to teach and develop at that